And a first main point is that heat, higher temperatures kill. But almost all of those deaths are preventable. The estimates are in the several hundred people dying every year from heat. There was an analysis last year using the same kinds of methods that are being used right now for COVID-19 to take a look at over the periods when you've got high temperatures, how many deaths would you expect and how many deaths actually occur. That analysis suggested that it's more like 5,500 Americans die every year from the heat. We know from the climate science that heat waves are increasing in frequency, intensity, and duration. So the concern for the future is, as temperatures continue to rise, that unless actions are taken, mortality is really going to increase during the summer. The actions we can take range everywhere from making sure that people undertake activities to reduce their core body temperature. In most regions, it does not have to be air conditioning. People can reduce their core body temperature using self-dousing, wetting your skin, and turning on a fan. That's highly effective from a physiological perspective for helping reduce your core body temperature. And I do want to make one point: when we think about heat, we also need to think very clearly about the equity and environmental justice factors. We know in the United States, for example, redlining has made a significant impact in terms of the heat in particular areas. And they're the areas where people who are poor and marginalized live. There's fewer trees, there's less airflow. The structure of those particular urban environments are such that they tend to be hotter.
California, as a matter of geographic focus and the escalating drought that is unfolding in this part of the country, it is actually part of a much broader drought across the American West, especially the southwestern states of California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. So this is affecting quite a broad region. But zooming in on California right now, the intensity of the drought is extremely severe. This is not just run-of-the-mill drought, if you will. This is a top-tier drought historically. In fact, we are currently on track to surpass the severity of the last drought, which occurred back around 2013 to 2016. And by many metrics, that was the worst drought in California's recorded history. We're currently on track to surpass that just a few years later. And so ultimately, there's just less water available on the landscape, which means that the soils become drier, the vegetation becomes drier. It means that plants require more water that is less available. And so all of this means that not only is there less water in rivers, lakes, and streams available to humans and to the environment and to agriculture, this chart is just showing the long-term trend in temperatures in California. It's clearly getting a lot warmer than it used to be. And this chart is showing the increase in drought severity and intensity. So the more yellow you see, the more frequent and the more intense the droughts. We've seen an increase in drought frequency and severity in California, even though we have not seen a decrease in long-term average precipitation. What's causing this? It's primarily the warming temperatures.
I want to highlight we're already paying a price for climate change. There are children who lost parents, grandparents, parents who lost their children during Hurricane Katrina, Maria, during the fires in Paradise. There were people who had to leave the communities they were part of in different parts of the world because of the impacts of climate change. So we're already experiencing it. And the people that are impacted, they will bear scars from that for the rest of their lives. But also, when it comes to addressing climate change, what we see from climate models is that the issues are going to become more severe. They will also, as we know from COVID-19, any injustices that exist will interact with other inequities in ways that will be particularly devastating for low-income communities, communities of color. Some can afford to just simply move. They may have multiple homes, but that is not everybody. It's in fact not most people. So we have to work to address and mitigate climate change in ways that are equitable so that they don't that the events that happen don't perpetuate inequities for us and for future generations in ways that are really devastating. And then specifically, we hear a lot in industry about electric cars, but how do we ensure that most people can access these? Most people can't pay for a new car. So what about electric car conversion kits so anybody can modify their car and then people can be trained up in communities to do this? For solar, is it just going to be on rooftops in wealthy areas, or will there be community distributed solar so that it's affordable in both urban and rural areas?
Because I am optimistic that we're beginning to take it seriously. But I think the challenge there is that we're still not doing today what we would need to do to really solve the problem. So while I'm optimistic that we'll get there eventually, in the meantime, there could be pretty big problems that come up. We're already starting to see some of them now. But even if we start taking climate change very seriously and eventually bring global carbon emissions to zero in the next couple of decades, there will still be at least a couple more, probably a few more decades of significant additional warming, increases in extreme heat waves and in droughts and in all of these things that we've been talking about. So in the meantime, we are going to have to adapt to this new climate reality. And in that sense, that too would get worse before eventually it gets better. And what I hope is the optimistic scenario that we do solve the underlying problem.